behalf of the Hamilton Parents Partnership and Alcohol Council, I want to thank the Elks for the use of their facilities tonight. Certainly nothing more important in today's life is the subject of drugs and alcohol abuse, tobacco problems in our society. I'm happy to say that it's been an important part with a lot of parents and parent groups and the school systems in Butler County. And over this past week during Substance Abuse Awareness Week, a lot of teenagers in Hamilton and Butler County schools have learned a lot from various individuals that worked very hard to put this week together. Certainly in the work I do, we spend millions of dollars in law enforcement, municipal court, and incarceration trying to deal with social problems. And probably if our society could be re-energized and changed, we need to look at other ways of doing that and spending those resources at a much better advantage. And that starts with the home, parental responsibilities, raising children, and peer issues with individual children. Our greatest resource is the next generation. My greatest resource today is the 750 men and women that work for the City of Hamilton. And we certainly need those individuals to come to work, prepared to work, and raise their families and contribute to society. Life's a lot different today than it was when I was in high school, college, a few years ago. And we have more challenges for young people today than ever before. We need a commitment in this country, in this community, in this county, for parents to pick up the responsibility working with their children, for the educational systems in our society to meet the needs of these individuals, but also for kids to understand their role and their future. Today it gives me pleasure to bring to the podium some individuals I'd like to introduce, and they'll speak to you for a few minutes, and then we're going to open this up to questions and answers that you may have, especially the parents that hadn't had the opportunity maybe to be around some of the programs that were done in the school systems throughout Butler County this week. I'd like to ask Ben Holliday to join me, Dr. Mike Thompson, and Milton Crea. Now Milton, we're going to let we're going to ask each of them to address you, but Milton's had some rather important dental surgery in the last day, so he wants to take it a little easy tonight. So, Ben, you want to be first?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. The last 2 days, I've had an opportunity to travel into most of the junior high schools in the Hamilton area, and this morning and yesterday afternoon into Ross High School and into Lemon Monroe High School. I'm kind of a native boy from here, even though a national speaker. Dayton, Ohio is my home, and actually a Butler County native. I was born in Middletown Hospital, so something great did come out of there once. Oh, okay. My mother, obviously, is who I was talking about. But I've had a great time in the last couple days. I'm kind of tired, honestly. We've been running from sunup to sundown, literally, and I have met some very interesting people. I must honestly speak, though. While I have a great passion for this, this afternoon probably was the most significant to me. Please excuse me for a minute, but I had a chance to go over to the juvenile detention facility and meet with 40 young people, males and females, that seem to have lost hope. If there is ever a message that we can share with the young people in our country, is that there is hope. And I believe that if we ever lose sight of that, then we lose them. And if ever we really want to impact and affect drug abuse in our country, we need to get back to the basics of home and family and love, to reach young people before they have a need or a crisis in their life that they ever need to turn to anything like this. And if there is a call for us to reach out to people, it is now, to come together as family, as community, church, service organizations such as this, and communities, to pull together, to reach out and hope and love to reach our kids, to make a difference. And when we all work together, we're going to make a difference. And I really appreciate the sacrifice that you have made to come out here and represent this community. I appreciate it. Don't ever, ever, ever give up. We are making a difference, sometimes just one at a time, but it's worth it all. And thank you, and thank you for having us here. It's greatly appreciated.
Use this mic.
This one?
That's not on.
More back.
That's fine. All right, good evening. Well, we're going to try that again. Since we're all here for a good cause tonight, we're going to try that again. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, there you go. Folks, my name is Milton Creon. Let me just spend a couple of minutes and just share a couple of things with you. You know, as we look at the drug problem in America, I've been with you kids for the last couple of days, and I think one of the things that we've got to look at, and hopefully we can get on the table tonight for some discussion. We keep going around this country talking about the drug problem. We keep saying, well, we got to stop the kids from using drugs. Tell the kids to just say no, just say no, just say no. Tell the kids to stop. And I think it's good that we do that, but there's one piece of this thing we've got to keep in mind if we ever really want to win this war on drugs, because the truth of the matter is, I don't care what anybody else tells you, right now we're losing. We're losing pretty bad. Now, we know that because drug usage has more than doubled amongst junior high and senior high kids over the last 5 years. But more critical than that, one of the things that nobody wants to talk about, and I don't think we'll win this war until we start talking about it, is that right now, let me put a couple things in perspective for you. Ladies and gentlemen, right now in this country, we represent roughly 6% of the world's population. That's it, that's all. We're only 6% of the world's population. However, we consume in this country, the United States, we consume approximately 67% of the world's supply of illegal drugs. Now, if you don't get what that means basically by and large, we are the junkies of the world, bar none. If we're not the United States of America, there would not be a significant drug problem in this world. Let's put it another way. You can look at it from this perspective. If you took every other country on the face of the earth, smashed them all together, they would barely equal half the amount of dope used in this country. Now, as an American, that's an embarrassment to me. As an American, that's embarrassing, it's frightening, and I think you ought to be embarrassed and frightened by that also. But here's the part that's scary. The real scary part is this. Now, we're the country that consumes 67% of all the drugs in this world, and yet we keep talking about stop the kids, stop the kids, stop the kids. And 74% of all the illegal drugs consumed in the United States of America are consumed by people who are in the workforce. Now, folks, in case you didn't know, let me give you a hint. We have a wonderful thing in America called child labor laws. Guess what that means? Who's in the workforce primarily? I'm sorry to hear you. Adults. So in other words, what we've been doing is we've been spending all our time talking about stop the kids, stop the kids, stop the kids, stop the kids. And if we don't get to a point we start looking at what adults are doing and dealing with the issue in terms of adults, you will never win this war. You will never solve this problem. You know, for the last 10 and a half years, I spent about 230 days a year in classrooms talking to kids, and I do programs at night for parents. And typically when I talk to kids, I talk for about an hour and a half. Usually after about the first 5 to 10 minutes, it's quiet enough in the room that you can hear a pin drop. Typically after I finish a program, I can't leave for about another hour to an hour and a half because so many kids come to me in tears, so many kids come to me with pieces of paper and a pen wanting me to write down suggestions or advice on what kinds of things they can do. And the thing that's blown me away in the years I've been doing this is that the number one thing kids come and talk to me about, it was the case at all of your schools I've gone to in the last 2 days. It was a case in Boise, Idaho last week. It was a case in Alaska 6 months ago. No matter where I go in this country, number one thing that kids come and talk to me about is not about their friends using, it's not about them using. The number one thing by a long shot I hear is about mama and daddy using. about mom and daddy getting drunk and fighting, about mom and daddy smoking pot, mom and daddy tooting coke. And I don't understand how anybody in this country thinks we're going to solve this drug problem by continually just talking about kids without adding parents to the equation. So we've got to start looking at what parents are doing, what kind of examples are we setting. That talks about parents' consumption of legal drugs like alcohol and parents' consumption of illegal drugs, primarily marijuana and cocaine. If we don't look at this, folks, I promise you, we will never turn this thing around if we don't start talking about adults. I was just in a school today. A young man there, a football player there, has a real concern. His dad's an attorney in this town. His dad also has a cocaine and marijuana problem. Well, the kid is a little confused now because we're telling him at school, don't do drugs. And yet the kid looks and says, well, but look at my dad. He's doing fine. What's wrong with drugs? Folks, we got a problem. And we got to start in this country. And if I can't leave you with anything else, I'm going to leave you with this, is that we are not going to really win this war until we start talking honestly about what's going on and we start dealing with truth and reality. It's not about hiding from it. We need to deal with some reality in our country. And that is, we got a problem with kids using, we got a problem with adults using. And we got to address both. Don't stop what you're doing with the kids. Keep the just say no, keep the dare. Keep having folks like Mike and myself and my brother over here come in and talk to your kids. You got to do that, but we've got to get into the workplace, we got to get into churches, and we got to get into jails and prisons and start giving our message out to more adults about what's going on. And that's really the one thing, if I can share anything with you tonight, I really want to share with you, that we got to do some more of that. I want to thank you all for letting me come. I apologize. I got here yesterday and ended up having to go in for an emergency root canal at a doctor that's not my doctor. And so this has been a very interesting day, very interesting indeed, but I'm just glad to be here with you. And God bless you, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
Okay, I'm Dr. Mike Thompson. Everybody do this. Ooh. Okay, big deal. I'm a doctor, okay? Now, do this. Take one hand, put it up like this. Little audience participation. Take the other hand, put it up like this. Called the official doctor clap. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Good, good. Now, how many in here are parents? How many are parents? Okay? How many have kids between the ages of birth and 5? How about 6 to 9? How about 10 to 15? How about 16 to 18? How about 19 and above? How many raised your hands several times? Okay. Now, let me ask you this, okay, and I ask the audiences all over the world. I've lectured to over 1 million people now. How many in here as adults feel like you've been shot to a different planet compared to when you grew up? Remember when you grew up, your mom, dad, and other people told you what? Sit down, you sat down, right? Told you shut up, you shut up. They told you to roll over, you just looked for the dish, right? It's a whole different planet, right? Now, do this. Take the palm of your hand, put it up like this, gang. Take the palm of your hand, put it right on top of your head. Now go like this. Look to the person on the left, go like this. Look to the person on the right, go like this. Look back up here. Now everybody goes, well, what's this, you know? Well, you know what they call these? These are choice detectors, don't have to detectors. MC Hammer can't touch me detectors. And I'll tell you what, gang, this is all of a sudden, it fits in with what Ben and Milton are talking about right now, which is what's going on in the country and what I've been seeing, okay? And what's happening is all of a sudden these puppies now are coming up, okay? You and I had them on the old planet. We need to understand this, okay? But the bottom line is, guess what? They were in our pocket, right? That's why we have change as an older person. You were thinking about it. We were legends in our own mind, right? But we wouldn't have taken our hand out of the pocket and talked back to mom, dad, and other people and all that, coaches, bosses, teachers. In fact, how many in here, if you would have done the things that we see nowadays, how many wouldn't be sitting here right now? Now, the other thing is this. If you would have taken your hand out of the pocket, how many agree with me? You would have got your hand cut off. Yeah. Well, if you don't, show me your stub, okay? Because out of 100 people, 99 had their hands in the pocket, right? That one boy or girl you don't see at the reunions coming back, they're like Jimmy Hoffa. They're in the end zone or fish bait. Somebody took care of them, right? Well, here's what happened, gang. All of a sudden, I've been seeing this around the world. They've been coming up, 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 up. I'm up at the university level. I work with all the athletes at Ohio. Well, it's not Ohio State. I'm down on one knee. The Ohio State University. It's got the "the" in front of it, okay? Work with all the athletes, go through that university the last 7, 8 years. Obviously, I've done a great job with the basketball team, okay? But what happens, you want to talk something? Everybody repeat after me. Say good choices. Good choices. Say poor choices. Poor choices. Say my choice. Yeah, it's a theme of everything I do on TV and things like that, or radio. Good choice, poor choice, my choice. I want people to understand that because the world's filled with nothing now but this. And it's coming up here, university level. People are saying, that's it, I've had it. I'm going down to high school where you can make an impact. They walk down to high school. You talk to these high school teachers, they'll tell you what? Hey, this is like university, okay? In fact, when I did my doctoral study at the Ohio State University. You know what we found out? 65,000 kids in Franklin County we surveyed, an attitude and actual usage of tobacco, drugs, and alcohol. Found out one significant area was this. By the time they graduate from the 11th grade, in their head they consider themselves graduated from high school, making university 5 years in length, gang, starting when? Senior year. What's the #1 most mimicked behavior that at one time was reserved for college? Spring break. I want spring break. Shut up, I'll do what I want, you know. And if I go to a dance, I'm spending the night, too, with my date. I got 2 kids raising me. I wrote this book called Who's Raising Whom? That's me on the cover. I got enough mousse in my hair to withstand a hurricane here. But it's also subtitled Strategies for Saving Your Sanity. How many would be interested in saving your sanity? How many have already lost your sanity? Now, you know what people say? That's it, Mike. I've had, because my daughter even came home this year from a first dance. One of these, she's a freshman at the high school level, little blonde-haired, blue-eyed bopper, you know. She's now at that point, she's a cheerleader, and now we don't talk at the table. It's like, hi, Dad, how are you? Nah, 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 nah. Ah. You know, kind of stuff. My son's a sophomore at the high school level, 2 inches taller than me. You know, it's like Milton here. It's like, hi, little people, how you doing? Yeah. He's at the point where, hey, things are changing, Dad, okay? You do a lot of seminars, but don't do it at my school. If you come to school, drop me off at school, drop me off 2 or 3 blocks from school. If I tell people I'm an orphan, doesn't mean I don't love you, okay? I'll save tickets for you and Mom at graduation time. I'll be there. Now, the thing is this, gang. People say, that's it, I'm going down to middle school where I can make an impact. Oh, this is interesting. I had the good fortune of meeting Phil Collins in the group Genesis. He wrote a great song about middle school. You know what they call it? Land of Confusion. It's where nothing fits anymore, nothing works anymore. How many know somebody living or working with a junior high age kid? Yeah, you'll see him all year long going like, whoa, whoa. And you know, people say, that's it, I'm going down to elementary school where you can make an impact. Well, you go down to elementary school, and I've got a graduate level teacher course called Strategies for Saving Your Sanity in the Classroom that's on PBS right now. And we're in the process of national distribution with that one. But here's the thing, gang. Elementary teachers are saying, oh, can you help me, help me, help me? What's going on? I say, what do you mean? Hey, down here, you know what? We have a little girl over here. She took a scissors. Woo! She whips it across the room, both distance and accuracy, hits little Freddie in the back of the neck. And all of a sudden now we go, honey, 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 this is called a poor choice. And here's what they're doing. Hey, here's my attorney's card. And people say, that's it, Mike. I'm going down to preschool where I can make an impact. I'm telling you, gang, these are up, okay? There's a subchapter in my book called The Willingness to Wear a Helmet and a Flak Jacket. And I'll tell you what, somebody asked me on the news today and they said, what happened? How did this? Well, everybody repeat after me. Wimpy? Adults. Yeah, because I've seen coaches, because I do a lot of the coaches workshops, and I got coaches, one in San Francisco not too long ago said, you know, Dr. Thompson, I'll tell you what, good presentation, really enjoyed this big fella, but you know what, if I went back and confronted my team with chewing tobacco, with tobacco products, wacky weed, and alcohol and other drugs, I tell you what, Doc, I wouldn't have a team. Hey, come here, Coach, come here. You know, aren't you the same person telling me something's got to be done? Do you realize how much power, control, and choices you have? Whoa. Years ago, gang, we used to do this. If you fell on the old planet, you hit the floor. And you know what? You realize that, hey, I got a problem. Everybody repeat after me. Problem, problem. Who owns the problem? I love it when people go like this, and you know what? They understand that they hit the floor. And they understand that, hey, I own the problem. And now also repeat after me. The only people without problems are dead. Good. You and I have to teach that to everybody. And you know what I say? The man or the woman with the most skills in life to deal with the daily problems of living win. Not the person with the most toys. Because I've always, oh, man with the most toys, woman with the most toys. Hey, next time you go to a funeral, check it out. See if there's a U-Haul behind the hearse. You ain't taking this stuff with you, okay? But if you have good skills, and those skills come in handy. Since age 18, I've been working in the drug alcohol treatment field. Not a recovering alcoholic or drug addict, so I was kind of an odd duck in that field. Even working at a place I call the WFMC, World Famous Mayo Clinic. I'll tell you what, I've had the good fortune of seeing both sides. People that have developed serious drinking, drugging problems. And those that choose not to get involved with tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. And I see, gang, it's all related to one thing, frustration, stress, problems, hassles. And one person takes this choice, and this choice works. And it works every time. But the problem is it creates tremendous consequences in their life. And this person over here has learned the skills to deal with the daily problems of living. Last thing I'm going to do is this. Take your hand, put it like this. We've got a serious problem in this country called victimhood and blamehood. How many understand what I'm talking about? How many understand and want our kids to go into what we call adulthood? Yeah, me too. But now, point your hand at me like this. There are more people that do this. Hey, you know what? The teacher gave me a bad grade, and thanks a lot, Mom and Dad. You grounded me. And you know what? The cop even put me in jail, and boy, I can't stand it. Now, keep that hand up there like that. You got one finger on that hand pointing out. How many fingers got pointing back at yourself? 3. Yeah, 3. 1, 2, and 3. Everybody repeat after me. Say, oh, yuck. Yeah, because you know what? This is what true adulthood is all about. You parents in this room, I'll tell you, how many in here, I told your kids that I talk to in the schools, I say, hey, how many of you kids want a couple hours, maybe a couple days away from your mom and dad? What do you think? Well, yeah. Now, here's what I said. I tell you what, you go home, tell Mama what Dr. Mike taught you. Because Dr. Mike taught you this. And they go home and they tell Mom and Dad, you know what, Mom and Dad, we're all done arguing. We are all done arguing. In fact, Dr. Mike taught me this. You will never ground me again. You will never take things away, phone, stereo, Nintendo. The First National Bank of Mom and Dad will not be closed. And also, the teacher doesn't give me a bad grade, and teacher never puts me in detention or Saturday school, and a cop will never put me in jail. I learned from Dr. Mike, it's my poor choices. Now, you know what happened to all of us parents? Boom. We'd be out for a couple days, couple hours for sure. They'd get exactly what they want. How many agree with me? Wouldn't this be a switch? What I'm doing around the country is this. There used to be an old saying that you lead a horse to water, you make it drink. On the old planet, maybe it worked, gang. Maybe you did that. My grandmother said, yeah, that's what you did. You led the pony to the water. Your dad was one of those. My dad used to stand behind her and go like this. You know what? They could take that pony nowadays, those young people today, and you could pull them to the water, put their head in the water, and you know what? They'll choose to drown. They know power, control, and choices better than anybody in this room. And it's not by chance God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. Even though I'm Norwegian, Swede, come from the land of Wisconsin, I'm a cheesehead, put a boot in my mouth, and I listen. And now what I do is this. Everybody repeat after me. Last thing, I do jokes. I do windows. I don't do arguments. I don't argue with these ponies now. You know what I do? I choose to do this, throw salt in the pony's oats. When you throw salt in the pony's oats, you know what? They may be interested in coming to over here and making the right choices, but they have the power, the control, and choices to do that. And that's what I taught in the last couple of days. So I take a little bit of switch to this, but a little bit of slant to this, and I'll tell you what, I just want to tell you that the schools that I went into in the last couple of days, kids are phenomenal, okay? And the 3 of us here, well, I tell you what, we've had a lot of experience and a lot of stuff go on in that. And the bottom line is both Ben and Milton are right. There's a major, major problem in this country. And there's a problem that the 3 of us are constantly throwing salt. And when you do that, you influence people. And when you influence people, it's just like me. Not being an alcoholic, I can tell you what, getting in this field at age 18, you know what it does? It messes up your drinking. Because it messes up your thinking about drinking. And attitude's where it all starts, gang. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to come into the community here, but share my stories with you folks and be a part of this panel tonight. So thanks, gang. Thank you.
We've heard some interesting introductions, and we'd like to open it up to the audience. I'm sure you are sparkled with an idea or two or a question. Let's have one, and we'll have the speakers come back and try and relate to your question. Yes.
I have a question. What grade levels of schools do you go to?
Question is, what levels of schools are you all working with?
Let me tackle that one for a minute.
Okay. Ben Holliday.
We'll just take turns for a minute. Actually, what we have seen, I think we can consistently speak here, and Melton kind of hit on it. We're actually seeing that we are going to we keep going back further and further and further to younger and younger groups. Frankly, while we do a lot of high schools, while we were here this week, we did 6 through 12. Anybody do any more than that? 6 through 12. I was at Fairfield Middle School today with 700 sixth graders. Yeehaw. At the last period of the day. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. And but there was a tremendous amount of hormonal activity in sixth graders. But what we are seeing is that the experimental for drug use, according to NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, is now back to as early as 9-year-olds, and that is experimenting usually with inhalants and hallucinogens. Folks, the drugs that we saw in the 60s, they are back bigger, better than ever before. The joke about domestic grown marijuana is no longer a joke, and as we well know here in Ohio, some of the best marijuanas in the world are cultivated in southeastern Ohio and in Kentucky. Kentucky's #1 cash crop for the last 5 years running has been marijuana. So it is not a joke anymore about our domestic drug use, and we have to get that education as soon as we can. And that is to everybody. And I'd just like to write on one other thing here while we've talked about it. And a lot of people debate with me about this, and hey, I know you have your attitude all you want about your personal choice to use. Folks, the #1 thing I hear from teenagers, they come to me and they say, I am tired of hypocrites telling me what to do. Now, this is not an adult bashing party tonight, but we do have to get very serious about our own use. We are a drug abusing nation. We have those places on every corner. We have super drug stores now. And you get a headache, you take a pill. You get a backache, you take a pill. You get a runny nose, you take a pill. You want to get pregnant, you take a pill. You don't want to get pregnant, you take a pill. You can't fly an airplane, you take a pill. And what's the last thing we tell our kids when they go out the door in the morning? We slide a Flintstone over to them and say, Johnny, don't forget your Flintstone. And we're teaching kids a certain type of behavior that we need to be accountable for. Now you're sitting here and go, oh, come on, get realistic. Folks, I am getting realistic. When I was on the police department, I was called in and asked to interrogate 4 fourth graders, girls, that were selling pills. And the reason they were selling pills is because one of the girls was going to get in a fight after school, and her mother, who opens that brown pill bottle every morning, puts a pill in her mouth, looks at her daughter and says, oh, honey, this is not drugs. This is an energy pill the doctor gives me to help me lose weight. What do you think that little girl heard? The doctor gave me this. She heard energy pill, and the other little girl was going to get in a fight. She needed energy. She sold her a pill for $0.25. Fortunately, she grabbed the wrong bottle. She grabbed the water pills. The little girl just peed a lot. But hey, the message was there. And when I interrogated this 4th grader, she looked at me and she said, my mom does not use drugs. What did they do 50 years ago, for Pete's sake? We got to get serious. In my opinion, this is my opinion, my soapbox for my minute, and then I'll sit down and shut up. We need to go to zero tolerance in this country, and we need to decide that we that know how to socially use will not make it accessible for those that do not. And if you just like it for the taste, there's plenty of the artificial stuff out there. Just say no, period. Martyr me later.
Responsibility. Another question. Yes, sir.
How do you change the attitudes?
Okay, the question is, how do you change the attitudes? Dr. Mike.
Okay, attitudes regarding everything from tobacco, alcohol, drug use to just general attitude kind of things. How many think we have young people in the world today with an attitude problem? Hey, duh, kind of stuff, right? People have always said, I have a private practice office up in Upper Yuppington area, and people will walk in there many a times and say, hey, I got this attitude. And one of the things is this, okay? I think in the world today we have done some injustice to kids by remember the old huff, puff, blow the house down routine? We've done a lot of huffing and puffing, but we don't blow the house down. And that doesn't mean be mean or critical. In fact, I teach many a times that discipline, you got to rethink this whole thing called discipline and punishment. Discipline and punishment do not teach a person what to do, they teach a person what not to do. The second thing is discipline and punishment always definitely create one more problem on top of whatever you're trying to solve. And the third most important thing is discipline and punishment indirectly teach a person that, hey, somebody's got more power, control, and choices than you do. When it comes to attitude, I think the thing is, my kids, 2 kids raising me, Christopher and Holly, their attitude will start to get negative when they start they start getting things that they're not earning. Okay? I wrote us another subchapter in a book called, and in fact, I'll ask you a question. How many know some young people, they're probably not in this area, but they have the middle name of Get Me, Buy Me, Take Me, Give Me? They may be in this area, okay? And you know what? The unfortunate part is we get it, buy it, take them, and give it to them. And when we do, it also fosters victimhood, blamehood. It also fosters attitude. And people say, but Dr. Mike, how do you change that attitude? You know what? We have control over whether or not we reach for the First National Bank of mom and dad. We also have control over rides. We have control over what we choose to do for our kids. And we're not mean and nasty and ogres like our kids may tell us we are if we make a choice to not allow them to earn those kind of privileges. So attitude is actually fostered. It's not something you just pop in the world. There's some genetics to it, okay? My daughter can have her hand in the cookie jar, and when she can actually, she'll say more or less, oh, okay, you got me. She's what we call wimpy. She's easy. My son, though, it maybe is genetics. He'll have his hand in the cookie jar, or go, hey, poor choice, and he'll go, it's not my hand. What? You know, it's all done with mirrors. Well, this is the one that, quite frankly, you don't argue with this attitude. You don't. You'd be better trying to get a fish to jump out of the water, okay? This one, what happens is, unfortunately, just like other people, they need to go to the next level and sit with their own earned hassles. For how long? Time limit's open. Why? Because problem, who owns the problem? And just like some of the cards you were given there, hey, who owns the problem? Who owns the responsibility? Who made the decisions? Who has the power, the control, and the choices? That teaches adulthood. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay.
I like that. Choices. Okay, another question. Yes, sir.
If it were a perfect world and you had total control, what would be the first thing that you would do to start to make a change?
If it was a perfect world, you had total control, what would be the first thing that you would do to make a change?
You guys aren't helping my tooth. I think if perfect world, first thing I'd do to make a change, perfect world, to be honest with you, is I think tied to something we said earlier, get rid of some of the hypocrisy, and that is let's start getting real about what's truly going on. And I guess first let's get drugs out of the government. In terms of, I think it's mighty interesting that we have an administration in D.C. right now that there are folks who still have not gotten their security clearance because they can't pass lie detector tests about illegal drug usage in the previous 2 years. I don't think you're real serious about solving a problem with drugs if you do that. But I think bigger than that, and that's threw that in. I think bigger than that for me, one of the biggest things we have to look at is that we really do live, as I heard Ben say earlier, in a society that has made drug usage very easy and very normal. We've normalized it. How so? Because we have convinced people in America that you are never supposed to feel bad. And so, and if you do feel bad, there's a quick fix for it. There's something you can take right away so that you don't deal with the pain. The reality is that in life, you know, we go through pain. You have bad times and good times. But we've taught people in America you're never supposed to feel bad. And if you do, by golly, there's a pill you can take. You said, I mentioned to you earlier that we use about 67% of all the dope in the world, illegal drugs. The part I didn't mention to you is, guess what? We use more Tylenol and Advil than anybody else in the world, too, by a long shot. We use more prescription drugs than anybody else in the world, by a long shot. We use more Pepcid AC, so that people can eat stuff that your stomach is telling you that doesn't fit your body, but you get sold on TV to buy it and eat stuff you're not supposed to eat anyway. So until we change that mindset about drugs, about how you take care of yourself, I don't know if we're ever going to turn this thing around. And I guess I would love to have it. I guess I gave you more than one. I'll give you a third one. Third one, I think, is I wish that we could just have a situation where, you know, where drug usage is not tolerated and the non-users felt they had a right to speak up about it, because our non-users in America are a tremendous silent majority that really kind of sit back and watch stuff. And I think if you look at the big drug epidemic during the 60s and 70s, one big difference between then and now, you know, back in the 60s, if I decided I was going to try drugs, the reality is I knew I had to hide that from my mom and my daddy, because if my daddy found out, there was no question in my mind that my daddy, his feelings about drug usage, I was convinced my daddy never used illegal drugs, and I know that. My father never used illegal drugs. My daddy would have thought it was terrible. He would have thought I was going on straight on my way to hell, and it was his job to either send me quicker or keep me from going altogether. Now, But the point being, though, my mama felt the same way, and almost any one of the adults in my neighborhood and all the adults in my church probably felt pretty much the same way. One of the problems we have today is that we have an awful lot of children today who live with mamas and daddies who were the folks who experimented with drugs during the 60s and 70s. And a lot of those folks, number one, still use. Perhaps even more frightening is a lot of them do not use anymore, but they're very uncomfortable speaking out to their kids, yay or nay, about drug usage because they feel kind of hypocritical. And as a result of that, we have a society now where, yeah, in the 60s and 70s, you had kids who used drugs, you had kids who experimented with drugs, but the experimentation was typically older, and we also knew that folks tried to hide it a little more because they knew how society as a whole felt about it. Today we got 9 and 10-year-old kids whose parents have been vacillating about drugs and whether it's good, bad, right, or wrong, or indifferent, so it's much more likelihood for kids to try, and kids don't feel that there's going to be that much repercussion for it because in many cases they know mom and daddy use, and they think mom and daddy aren't going to say anything. So perfect world, the pressure will be coming from more places, talking about drugs being wrong. And I think when we look at changing the attitude, as someone had said earlier, folks, you cannot overlook, and in this country we try to, we can say all the neat stuff we want, you know, but we better understand the power of that big ugly thing right there with the man with the silver hair behind it. You better not ever forget the power of that thing. You know, I went down to Aruba, and I spoke there, and it was mighty interesting. The Minister of Justice told me that about 3 years before I got there, they had no such thing as a homicide investigator. They did not have gangs. They did not have kids on the corner selling dope and all that. Yes, they had alcohol in Aruba, tied to the tourism industry, probably more than anything else, but they didn't have a problem with illegal drugs. But an interesting thing happened. He said about 4 years before I got there, all of a sudden things had changed. And all of a sudden now they had drug usage, they had gangs forming, they now need a homicide investigator. And we started talking about it. I said, what happened? What changed? What caused it? The one thing they could come up with that's a difference is somebody from the United States did them the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful pleasure of beaming 45 channels out of Miami into Aruba. Prior to that time, they had 2 channels. They had a channel, Aruba's a Dutch colony. They had a Dutch channel that came in, news and information. They had a local channel that talked about local happenings there. And it's amazing the stuff that they saw happen in that country once they got 45 wonderful, wonderful, wonderful cable channels out of Miami, Florida, brought in there. You see the same thing. I went to Alaska, a little colony, a little place there called Noatak. Noatak, you can get everybody in Noatak in this room. There aren't more than 100 people. There are no roads in Noatak. They picked me up a little airstrip on a snowmobile. That's the road, the snowmobile. You ride the snowmobile, big old me, on a snowmobile. And you know, it was interesting when I went to speak at the school in Noatak, there were only about 120, 130 people in the whole village. And I get there, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. They have a little school there. I'm speaking at the school, and I noticed something. All the boys on the left side of me had little red bandanas on. And all the boys on the right side of me had little blue bandanas on. And when I looked at it, I said, what's up? And one of the kids looks at me, he says, yo, man, I'm down with the Crips. And I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute, all y'all are related. What's up? But see, the kids have been watching TV and other stuff, and they decided now being a Crip is cool, being a Blood is cool. Folks, I think we got to start looking at this country at some of the things that are coming over TV. So what everybody's been trying to say is, well, let's put a block on what comes on TV. Well, let's censor TV. Well, let's put ratings on TV. I don't know, folks. Scary. Scary, scary, scary. We put ratings on TV, and everybody said, except, you know what? You go to Hollywood, and almost anybody who's a producer in Hollywood, you know what they'll tell you? They'll tell you if you want a movie to sell, you cannot have a G rating because folks don't like to go to G movies. It's got to be at least PG-13 nowadays to make significant money. So do you know what? We got movies now that have no business being anything other than G, and they will add profanity to it just so they can bump it up to a PG-13 movie. Why? Because the kids don't want to see G. And go back to that choice thing that Mike was talking about. Parents don't insist, no, we're not going to see that. We'll let kids, the age of that young man over there, go to a PG-13 movie. He ain't 13 years old. But mom and daddy will take him. And folks, so what have we done now with TV? Now we got ratings. Guess what's going to happen with TV in a couple of years? Nobody's going to want to watch anything unless it's got a TV PG rating to it. Or PG-13 or that 17 rating it has. And you know what the producers in Hollywood will do? They'll start making more of it because that's what's going to sell. Tipper Gore, she pushed people a few years back to put ratings on albums. Anybody know what happened to that beautiful idea? How many of you know that record companies found that often if you had the parental advisory sticker on there, it helped sales? So the point being this, we got to look at this thing. My contention is it's not about rating systems. Yeah, that's fine. We need some of that to help the parents who are doing their part. But maybe what we need more than anything else is we got to come up with some stuff that can compete with the stuff on there that's negative. We got to send our message in a competitive way. Stop dealing with this thing like it's social services, deal with it like it's business. In business, if somebody's beating you out in the sales, you come up with a better mousetrap, you market it, you push it, you sell it. And I think we got to sell the drug-free message and drug-free lifestyle.
Great message. Can't help but think everything I'm hearing is adults making decisions on marketing this material as well as money. There's two things going on. Kids aren't making movies. Kids aren't making a lot of the things. It's the adult world that's producing this. Question? Yes, sir.
In reading the National Drug Control Strategy for 1997, put out by the federal government, I've noticed in there that there are very few references to parent and single-parent teachings in the United States. Do they feel that this is not really a problem, or as Milton has alluded to, how do we as a community provide more parent-to-parent programs teaching us again over with the basics of how to be parents to our children for tomorrow?
I think what you got to look at, I think if you look at the strategy, I agree. It's kind of weak on bringing parents in. But I think people are saying, yeah, we got to get parents involved in this thing. My concern, though, when we talk about that, and I do think we got to do more stuff, the problem we have in getting parents out, drug-free, we've left this battle to a great degree in the hands of drug-free schools coordinators around this country and law enforcement. The problem with that is schools have been trying everything they can to get parents to come out. Community groups have been trying to get parents to come out. But over and over, what they end up doing, they get the same parents over and over again. How many of you in this room have ever been involved in an organization and you were trying to get parents to come out to talk about some of these issues? You did all the stuff they told you to do. I mean, you sent home notices with all the kids. You got it on local radio, got it on local TV, you got it announced in the local newspaper. You did those telephone tree things where you call folk at dinner time when they're busy. You did all that stuff they told you. Or you did that famous one, the one they tell you, feed them, they will come. You did all the wonderful stuff they told you to do, and then came that fateful day, fateful hour when your program was to begin. You looked around the room, and other than you and the folk you brought with you, you only had about 10, 12 people there. Anybody ever had that experience? How many had less than that? How many ever got a little frustrated? So the problem has been not that we don't recognize, people recognize the need to get parents involved. I think the biggest problem has been we haven't known how to get parents out. That's been the problem. And so we end up then focusing on the kids. Now I think we got two things we need to look at. I'm convinced that the reason, I get to talk to 700,000 kids every year. The reason I've done that for the last 10 years is I know it's not because of me. It's because of one thing. The reason Ben gets talked to a ton of kids, the reason Mike gets talked to a ton of kids, it's not because of Ben, it's not because of Mike. You know why we get to do it? Because we go through schools and kids are a captive audience. You see, when I go to a school, the principals do not go to every kid and say, excuse me, do you want to hear a drug prevention speaker? It doesn't work like that. They say, thou shalt go to the auditorium. Thou shalt sit down. Thou shalt shut up. Thou shalt pay attention. And then they say, Mike, Milt, Ben, go get them. Now, that's basically how that works. So we get a ton of kids. The problem is, again, getting the parents. Well, I'm going to tell you, here's the secret to getting parents. Don't miss it. It's worth the price of admission. 2 words, captive audience. And there are only 3 places that adults are captive audience. It ain't school. 3 places adults are captive audience. Work, church, jail. Only 3 places adults are captive audience. And yes, those are the places we got to go, but we got to get the workplace to see this is a significant issue for them. And a lot of people say, no, the workforce won't do that. That's a bunch of crap. I just left Boise, Idaho, and the businesses there got involved so much so, they kept pushing it. The businesses pushed it so much. We did a parent rally. Well, we had about 14,000 parents show up. So I'm convinced that if you get the businesses to get behind this, and get the businesses. And you know what's interesting? Some of the businesses are now saying, hey, Milt, I want you to come back. Instead of us going over to the Civic Center, come to our workplace. Let's do it here. Let's do an awareness program for parents here. So we got to go those 3 routes right there. And there's one last thing. You mentioned Parent to Parent. I've worked with Parent to Parent for a number of years with pride. Parent to Parent's a wonderful program. For those who don't know about it, it's a parenting program to give parents skills to help them raise drug-free children. One big problem with Parent to Parent. Parent to Parent won't do diddly for a mama and daddy who have a drug problem. Won't do diddly. See, we got to deal with their issues before we start talking to them about them dealing with the children's issues. And unfortunately, most of our parenting programs, again, have been focused on one thing: get the parents to take care of the children. At some point, I think we got to start doing adult programs that look at what adults are doing and dealing with some of those issues. And until we do that, I think we're in real trouble.
Ben Holiday.
Thanks. I was up in Chicago at Niles Township East, and I had 2,200 parents come out for one of the meetings. And the way they got those parents out is that they told the parents that before your children can participate in any activity in this school, you must attend one of 2 required meetings and sign off on a card before your child can be in band, play baseball, do anything in our school as far as extracurricular activities. Now, I tell you what, you tell Daddy, my boy ain't playing ball, I'll be there. I'll be there. Now, I may not be sober, but I'll be there. And it works. It works. And instead of just, if we send a kid to Saturday school, I think parents ought to have to go with them and find out why your kid's accountable or not accountable. But we can get them there. We've just got to come up with some creative ideas and get some people that have some fortitude to stand up to your parents and say, we're going to do it this way or we're going to die, period.
Just a question.
Yes.
I'm involved with current parent training. We've been debating about that, trying to get the coaches team-up program to require parent training. The first night that they bring their athletes together, explain their program and so forth and so on. And we've been discouraged about that, to do that, because people will say some parent will sue you because it should be a requirement for them to participate in public school activity. Yeah, have you run into any of that or heard anything about that?
Yeah, I have. Mike's got a comment on it. I tell you what, I was in a little tiny town, anybody from down in southwestern or southeastern Ohio, South Webster, little tiny town. They actually opened up in the morning with the announcements, believe it or not, still in America, with the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer. And I went to the principal, this was 2 years ago, and I went to the principal and I said, how did you pull that off? He said, no one's ever told me no yet, so I never stopped. We're running with our tail between our legs. And let some of them stand up to it. If it makes a difference, if you're saving my kid, it's worth all the suits that we're willing to fight for. And hey, let's do it until they tell us no, and let's see what we can do with it. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I do all of Ohio High School Athletic Association workshops in this state, and there's 277,000 athletes just in this state. Jill Jepson and some of the people from Lakota, who are even here tonight and that, they run it the way it should be run. And Beaver Creek, I was just up there a couple of weeks ago and started up their program. What they do is they expect, number one, a parent, one or both of the parents to be there if their child wants to participate in athletics. Because athletics is a privilege, not a right. If you make the choice to get involved with the few, the proud, the athlete, then you choose to come into our world called athletics. If you choose not to follow tobacco, alcohol, and drug-free codes and all that kind of good stuff, bottom line is you go play athletics out there in the public arena. We're not telling you can't be an athlete. We're just saying, and this is safety too. We're talking about tobacco, alcohol, and drugs that potentially can really harm people and hurt people. The biggest thing I've seen in this country, and I said about it, a coach in San Francisco, but that's all over the place too, is sometimes I do a workshop called Together We Can, which involves parents, athletes, and coaches working together. And this goes right in line with what these guys are saying too, which is for years they just sent me in talking to the parents. Well, the parents are one side of the triangle. And being a parent myself, I'd say, hey, those coaches got a responsibility. Well, I was a Peter Puck ice hockey coach back in Minnesota. My dad was a semi-pro Peter Pucker. My brother and I were Peter Puckers right out of the womb. And coaching high school hockey for 7 years in Minnesota, we had a saying as coaches, we'd look over at that side, the parents, and say, hey, we got them 8 hours at the most, you got them 16. Now, we're not dealing with this, you deal with it. Well, you know what we found out? The bottom side of the triangle were the athletes. Then they'd send a guy like me in to talk to coaches. Coaches would tell me that about the parents. Parents would tell me that about the coaches. And the athletes would go like this. Hey, if they're not setting the structure, then I guess we will. And I remember on my team that I played on, even in high school, my parents didn't say anything about it. My mom could have been named June, my dad Ward, my brother Wally, me the Beaver, okay? My parents didn't say anything about it because they didn't have the skills at that time, and they didn't really say anything. They just didn't. My coach just said, we're going to win state. Kick butt, that's it. I had a set of captains that looked like the World Wrestling Federation Rougeau brothers. They had square heads and bolts on the side of their head. Being seniors, they took their bottom teeth out and said, now listen, anybody does any drugs or anything like that, or messes around in class or anything like that, we're going to rip your eyes out. And it was like, hey, I don't need a picture of Punky Brewster, just say no button or nothing. I just need a couple of dudes that are going to tell me we're going to hold you accountable. And my challenge to athletes many a times is I go around and I say, you just take this out of an athletic code. And I asked a couple of them here yesterday because we had a workshop here for athletes and coaches. And I asked a couple of these football players, because you know the big honking guy, and I said, hey, I'm going to tell you right now. You look me square in the eyes. If I ask you to wear a shirt and tie on the day of a game, will you do it? And some of them give you that buzz mumble. Hey, you got to make a decision. The other thing is good grades. In school, out of school behavior too. If I told you on the old planet to get on your hands and knees and crawl 5 miles in order to be on a team, you'd have done it. All right? How many agree with me? If I would have told you halfway through the crawl, eat rocks, you'd have been eating and spitting. The bottom line nowadays, I even get the leaders, captains, designated captains in here that do this. Well, I'm not doing that. And my challenge sometimes is right out of drug and alcohol. If I asked you to wear pink frilly socks as a guy, and you got to wear them 5 days a week, you can't cover them up with long pants in order to be on the team. And I always do this. I point right at one of these footballs. I say, would you do it? The guy goes, no. I said, sit down. Would you do it? Yeah. Hey, you realize how much heat you're going to get from other people? Yeah. Why would you do it? Because I want to play bad enough. That's the key. And my challenge to athletics is, boy, I'm hot and heavy on this one. I get my undies in kind of a bundle on this one, okay? Because I've seen it both ways. And I've seen people that go this direction with it, and all they do is they turn out a lot of people. And trust me, gang, at the Big Ten, what do you think? You see all these people that end up on the news? We inherit them. They've been using drugs and alcohol for a long time. I'd love to have Dickie Knowles and Bobby Hayes up here right now, who I do a lot of talks with. World Series Philadelphia Philly teacher, Bobby Hayes, world's fastest human being, Dallas Cowboys. He'll tell you, hey, Dr. Mike's right. Back in high school, Dickie Knowles said I could pitch faster than most people could sober. Parents knew, coaches knew, staff members knew, athletes knew, nobody did anything. Same thing with Bobby Hayes. And look at where they're now. Not only with addiction, but also a fatal disease called shoulda, coulda, woulda. Okay? So these people that come out, these U-boat commanders, I call them, who always sit in the back row, they're in a jet set, okay? I'll tell you what, all I do is this, salt. I'm throwing salt in their oats. That's all I do. You mentioned control earlier. I teach people, you all in this room have 100% control over what? What do you have 100% control over? Ourselves. Yeah, now, you notice the way you say it? Ourselves. Everybody repeat after me. Say, it stinks. When you find out you got 100% control over yourself, guess what? It's just you. It's you. You make the better choices. That's why these 3 fingers come back to us as parents, come back to us as adults. That's why in that sheet that I say, who owns the problem? Hey, what part of the problem do I take on? What part of the responsibility do I own? See, that's where true growth, I think, starts. Make sense? Okay.
Yes, way in the back.
What's your opinion about drug testing or bringing a breathalyzer into a prom if the kids come in as a deterrent?
Question is, what do you think about drug testing, breath testing, as far as proms or other school activities?
I'll just mention a couple. Drug testing, I mean, bottom line is I could take a drug test on anybody in here right now, and you know what that'll tell me? Whether or not you're using drugs or whether or not it's in your system. It won't tell me whether or not you have a problem with it, okay? When I worked in the Department of Psychiatry and Psychology at a place I call the WFMC, World Famous Mayo Clinic, we could add all the fancy gadgetry in the world, but it didn't tell you whether or not a person's chemically dependent, okay? The other thing is you got to take a look at the sophistication of the drug test that's being used, too. There may be like the Reader's Digest you is or you ain't test, too. Answer 10 of these yes, guess what? You is, you know, kind of stuff. So you got to be real cautious about that. But the other thing is, yeah, it does put up what? It does put a pin in your hind end. And when it puts a pin in your hind end and you know you might have to pee in a jar, so to speak, hey, it puts you on notice. It really does. But any schools that I've ever dealt with who say, yeah, we're going to get it, because that's the first thing, we're going to get a drug testing program. They almost have this silver bullet mentality. And these guys will tell you, there isn't one thing that's going to make this problem go away. It's like spokes in a bicycle wheel, gang. You've got lots of different options you need to try. And that's why I feel so bad for some of these drug-free schools coordinators, because, hey, it's one person. It's one person. You ask them, boy, they're like jugglers. They got things going all the time. And they will tell you that people like us will come and go, people like us. But I tell you, gang, I'm at and somebody asked up here, when would you start this? All the way down. All the way down. I teach skills all the way from kindergarten all the way up. Best compliment I got was a couple weeks ago in Michigan, a little 4th grade kid. After a talk that I did in the assemblies and that, they went back to the teachers, talked about it. And the kid went up to his teacher at noontime and said, "You know what? I'm going to make sure my mom doesn't see Dr. Mike tomorrow night. I don't want him to talk to my mom or listen to him." And the teacher says, "Honey, I thought you liked Dr. Mike." "Oh, I did, but I don't want her to go because she'll really start to understand this." See, and she'll understand because I keep blaming 4th grade kid, gang. These kids know. These kids know. 9th grade kid I had a couple weeks ago went to spring break, was gone for a full week. Mom and Dad never knew he was gone. Now, you and I wonder how that happens. That has happened several times in my office. According to his story, drank 357 cans of beer, had pictures to prove it and all that kind of stuff. How's that happen? This kid's been grooming his parents for years. Don't you dare check up on me. Don't you do this. Why do you think? And then my wife Carol, who I'm going to be married to 20 years, coming up in August here, and we got 2 kids raising us and that. 3 of my best friends at home right now. Carol, my wife, Christopher, my son, Holly, my daughter. And I'll tell you what, relationship, gang, is where it's at. I book according to my kids' schedule. I could be gone 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Nope. I learned a long time ago what part of no don't I understand. So, bottom line, gang, is we have a lot of choices to make. But I think that it kind of rounds out the picture, too, here. Okay?
Milt, you touched on this, and I'll disagree with you. I think there is one silver bullet. I think that silver bullet is love, and I'm hoping or maybe all 3 of you gentlemen will touch on it. There are crying addicts out here in this audience today. There are people who are afraid to say to their kids because of the hypocrisy reason or for whatever reason. And I think that silver bullet is the love and whatever higher power a person has. You've been tiptoeing around it. If we love our children enough to say no, and I'm telling you no because I love you, and maybe this does hurt me more than it hurts you. We heard that from our parents. And if we have enough, if we teach them the love, and then if we cannot do that, it's because we do not love ourselves enough. And I think then the key and the silver bullet is the unconditional love that we can get from whatever relationships we have. And if our first relationship is with our higher power, it starts there. Would you please expound?
You know, I think, brother, I'm not going to excuse me, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm not going to disagree with you about the power of love, or I don't call my higher power, I call him Jesus Christ. But and folk can call whatever they want, but I know who is my God. And I think what you need to understand, it's not that simple. It is not. And I think one of the things I have to understand, yes, I believe very much in God. And you know what the Bible says to me? Is that if there's God, there's also Satan. And you must understand, I'm convinced that the drug problem is a tool of Satan's. I'm convinced of that beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we are talking about a battle. We are seriously talking about a battle. And so that battle, yes, the love can be your motivation, it can be your drive. However, that love in and of itself does not solve the problem and protect us from it. I'm convinced. since you took us in a spiritual vein, I'm convinced that God loved Adam and Eve. That did not stop Satan from tempting Eve and her taking Adam along for the ride. So I think we got to understand that this is a very complex issue. It's very easy for us to give it 20-second soundbite stuff. And you know, it's real interesting. I've noticed as we've had this conversation this evening, you know, one of the things I brought out right away was about the whole issue of adult usage, and that being the biggest problem. I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but as we've had our course of conversation tonight, it's almost like, and this is what I see everywhere I go, we've left that alone and going right back to talking about kids. And I go back again, you know, the situation did in Niles. It's great. We had 22 parents show up. But what do you do then when you have a kid like one of the kids I've taken into my home? I've taken 3 boys into my home. This boy's mom was a crackhead. This kid was all-American basketball player out of North Carolina. This kid's mama was so strung out on crack cocaine, she was not going to come and sign this kid up to play ball. She didn't give a darn. Mama was turning tricks at the crack house. So do we say to that kid then, hey, you can't play ball? They leave it alone? That's probably the one thing that kept that kid from being a drug dealer himself, was to do that. So we got to understand, folks, everything that you're hearing from us, we're giving you ideas and suggestions. It's not one shot fix all, okay? One thing is not, I don't think we're going to have a silver bullet. There are a lot of different issues we've got to look at, okay? I think when you look at someone who has a drug addiction themselves, I don't know if that person has the full capacity to show or express love to the people who are in their charge, perhaps their children or whoever, and that's a major problem. And I think you got to look at one other thing too. You know, it's interesting, Mike mentioned the fact that if you do a drug test, you don't know if there's a chemical addiction. I think one of the problems that we've also had in this country is we've led people to believe the only problem with drugs is when you become a junkie or you become an addict. And the only problem with alcohol is if you're an alcoholic or you drive. And I think we got to get people to understand that casual usage is extremely dangerous. You see, one of the things we know is that 1 out of every 4 girls, for example, is going to be sexually assaulted, sexually molested, or raped by the time she's 18 years old. And a town on the size of this, in 83% of the cases, the guy who does it, he'll be under the influence of alcohol at the time. Now, personally, I got 3 daughters. And my friend, if somebody rapes one of my little girls, I personally don't care whether it was his first time drinking or his 500th time drinking, whether he's experimental on stage or whether he's full-blown alcoholic. Doesn't make me any difference in terms of what he just did. So we've got to get kids to think, got to get adults to understand that casual usage is dangerous. Experimentation is dangerous, okay? And there's no guarantee if I start snorting cocaine today, there's no absolute guarantee I will become a junkie. There's no absolute guarantee I won't be functional for the rest of my professional career. But that doesn't make it right. And that doesn't mean that I can't have a one-time incident where I really hurt somebody in my family, either emotionally, spiritually, or physically, or somebody around me. And so I think that we got to look at the fact, I agree with you. Yes, it's a spiritual issue. But we're talking about, in that case then, sir, we're talking about spiritual warfare. And so it's not a one shot. All right, and I don't want to get too heavy into this, but just one last example. I'm convinced from Scripture that God loved David. And yet that didn't stop David from doing some heinous stuff. The reality is that if David came, if we had somebody like David doing what David did today, we wouldn't even want to talk to him. They'd throw him out to Elks Lodge. Okay? I mean, you would. All right? So I think we got to understand there's a lot more to this, and we got to understand, folks, this is serious. This is serious. This is serious. And yeah, we got to get parents in the schools. Yeah, that's all well and good. But dadgummit, if you don't get this into the business community, if you don't get this into the jails, 1 out of every 16 white men is either in jail, in prison, on parole, or probation between age 22 and 29. 1 out of 9 Hispanic men, 1 out of 3 black men. And most of those men, if you go to jails and talk to them, about 95, 99% of them have children. They're not going to stay in there that long. They're coming back out. Well, if we get an opportunity to work with them then, yes, let's work with them. Wherever we can get them, by hook or crook, let's start working with them and get some of this stuff turned around.
Another question. Yes, sir. Far in the back.
October 1996, the legislature in the state of Ohio passed House Bill 601, which provides the opportunity for school districts to require parents to attend a series of meetings based upon discipline problems, attendance problems, drug problems. Are you gentlemen aware of any specific programs that relate kids and parents together that can be utilized in evening sessions such as this, 2 to 6 hours. We just written board policy that will require that in our district next year.
Okay, question dealt with House Bill 601. Maybe Dr. Mike? Regarding the parent requirements.
Not being totally versed with the bill and its particulars, I cannot address its specifics. There are several programs that are out and are available. I think the big issue is, what do you want to accomplish? And I got a phone call from a very large local hospital once, and they said, Ben, we understand you deal quite a bit with adolescent sexuality. We, not me personally, but in schools, and they said, we are very concerned about prenatal care for young women, and we need to develop an advertising campaign so that we can reach those young women before they are in crisis. Do you have any recommendations? And I said, let me get this right. You want to develop a program that we can reach high-risk prenatal mothers. Is that right? And she said, yes, exactly. I said, you want me to help you develop some kind of marketing campaign. Is that right? And she said, exactly. And I said, and I started laughing somewhat. And she said, excuse me, did I say something funny? And I said, no, you'll have to excuse me. The girls that need prenatal care that you are trying to target, you can put a billboard at the busiest intersection in town and you are not going to get them in. If you really want to make a difference in these kids' lives, go get 5 Winnebagos, staff them with a doctor and 2 nurses, and drive into the projects and meet them where they live, and you'll make a difference there. But they will not come to you. We've covered this tonight several times, and please, this is not an assault, but you people are not the people we need to be talking to. The people that need to hear the message that we want to give tonight, if they even see this on cable TV, they're going to flip past it because they don't want to hear this. And the parents that we're going to be able to get out to these kind of meetings, we're not going to reach them. We have to come up with something that's going to go get them where they're at. And I don't know if having something at a place will bring them in. Am I skirting your issue enough? Am I being political enough? I'm sorry. That was an attempt at sarcasm. Am I getting anywhere? I mean, I don't, sir. I don't mean to skirt your issue, and I want Dr. Mike to because he deals more with that kind of thing than I do.
Really, the issue is we're grappling with the whole idea of finding programs that will help parents and kids working together.
Right.
I can share with you in hearings, I will sit there and the kid's been involved in alcohol, drug use, and they're going to be expelled from school, and the parent will sit there and say, so what? I use.
Yeah.
No big deal, go ahead and expel my kid. And now that we have some teeth and the possibility of requiring training for parents that brings both the child and the parent together, I'm interested in knowing, what programs are out there to deal with that.
Frankly, one of the most effective programs that I have personally been trained with, and I think is a tremendous program, and there's probably a few people in this room at least that are very familiar with it, is the Tough Love program. And it is a tremendous tool. It is a very tough tool. It is parents standing up in your kid's face and everything that you've heard up here tonight saying, look, I love you enough to say no. And it's a very powerful program. I would highly recommend it. There are probably as many programs as there are schools out there, but like I said, Dr. Mike is probably more familiar with many of those. I'm going to let him take the microphone here.
There's a couple programs that you're probably familiar with that I've done at your school, and at the Click One program, which is a program that I designed years ago that has 3 different clicks that occur on particularly athletic teams. Click One is moms, dads, coaches, that 3 parts of the triangle really pulling together, and understanding that there are people, and quite frankly, the athletes will describe their mom and dad as people that either choose not to use alcohol, tobacco, or drugs, or if they do, they use in a way that does not interfere with their life. You can get into some real definition on that one. Click 2, though, is one that starts to now, all of a sudden, people see the baby elephant in the locker room, so to speak, and they know it's happening and they don't do anything. Click 3 gets very, very out of control, and it becomes who's coaching whom. Those kind of programs, again, I'll go back to what I said before. If you just involve parents on one side, I don't think, I mean, people did that years ago with me, and it's just an ineffective use of money. If you just involve coaches, ineffective use of money. If you just involve athletes, ineffective use of money, quite frankly. When I pull people together, they may come in grumbling, but the bottom line is they'll leave, I think, through the vehicle of humor, laughter, but also use of props, and also really teaching people the willingness to wear a helmet and a flak jacket and hold people accountable. And have the willingness to say, if we have to go from the marching 100 down to the marching 3, so be it. Because that's where it needs to be at. And parents need to understand that too, that we're not hurting people, we're not pulling things away from them, we're actually allowing them to make some decisions in that. So there's those kinds of things. I think there's different kinds of parent programs that, you know, I go out and do what they call Rock Camp in Dublin, in my own community that I live in. And Rock Camp involves parents expected to be a part of that. I just was at the motel today and talked to some people from Michigan, grandparents raising their kids, an organization who are bringing me in to work with, and they said, do you think it should be grandparents alone and then you talk to the kids? And I said, I'll tell you what the best is, bring them both in at the same time. Just like that 4th grade kid, because guess what? Mom and dad now know the gig's up. And this is a part of this whole thing. And we talk about this, and back to your thing about love and that, absolutely. My whole point was relationship, and that's why I say it's the most solid thing, too. And the other thing I'll make a comment and tie it in with what we talked about here is religion. When I did my doctoral study at The Ohio State University, okay, the other variable out of 72 variables, gang, we ought to think about, you know, only one significant variable came out. And you know what it was? The longer a kid stays involved with any kind of religious activity, the less likely attitudinally and also actual usage of tobacco, alcohol, and drugs will occur. And what's that tell you? Forward to the basics. If we lived according to the 10 Commandments, we wouldn't have even close to the number of problems. And as Ted Koppel said, and I wrote a book for kids called Getting Your Parents Off Your Back and On Your Side, and in there, Ted Koppel also made the comment one time, it's not the 10 suggestions. Okay? So you think about those kinds of things, and I think if you teach that, yeah. The other thing I'll say real quickly, if you just teach drugs, research-wise, we know that if you just show drugs and teach what drugs are all about, drug use will go up. The other thing is, I think you really got to get into what kind of alternatives, because when I worked in the drug alcohol field, a person would say, okay, fine, great, okay, I'm going to stop. Now what do I do? Hey, don't drink, read the big book, and go to meetings. And then they'd come back and go, okay, I went. What do I do the other 23 hours a day? They had a good point. And I kept seeing, well, no, just tell me how that makes you feel. You know, let go, let God, easy does it, one day at a time, let's learn all the Bottom line is, my thing is this, you have a spoke in a bicycle wheel that became a very fat spoke. It's called tobacco, alcohol, or drug addiction. People pull that out, they run it down the rut, and guess what? It goes like this. It falls, we call that relapse in the field. I call it this. What skills have we taught? What new spokes have we taught that still meet the needs that at one time were being met by tobacco, alcohol, and drugs? If you don't teach skills, then what you're teaching is you're just giving information. And information itself isn't going to work, gang, in my experience. Okay?
Eric, let me give you a real quick answer to your question. No. No. You know, I think what happens is that, and I think this is a real problem in the war on drugs, quote unquote, and a lot of other things, is that, and this is how I got involved in this, because Pride had a program that was designed for suburban, upper middle class community, and there were bucks out there for programs to go in the inner city, to go into rural America, go into Latino communities, and we took this one program and then tried to stretch it to fit all these other areas, and it didn't work. I think that for what you're talking about needing, no, there's really not a program that's designed specifically to do that. Now, we could take a bunch of other programs. A lot of communities have used parent-to-parent. Well, it makes no sense to me. Parent-to-parent is not designed for kids. It's designed for adults. But I see communities, for example, in Tennessee, there's some communities there that are using parent-to-parent for exactly what you said. I think what the better idea is to, you can look at all these other programs, but then look at what your needs are and design something for your needs. For example, one of the things, and I have much respect for Ben and for Mike and the comments they made, but again, we keep going on this assumption that the parents really are the kind of great all-American parents we think they are. ain't true. You see, when I go speak in prisons, I spoke at a place in Texas called the Giddings State School. It's not a school, it's a prison, maximum security installation for juveniles who've been convicted of violent crime, and they're only waiting for their 18th birthday present, which is they go to prison. The average amount of time those boys are sentenced to is about 24 years, okay? The 100 Time Magazine did a big piece on them called Taming the Killers. Of the 400 boys I talked to, 136 of those boys have been convicted as adults of either murder or manslaughter, okay? Aggravated assault, serial rapist. One was a serial killer, okay? These are children, under 17, under 18 years old. Well, I asked one of the psychologists what these boys have in common. Said two things. Said, number one, majority of these boys never fit in the academic setting. In other words, these are the kids who are getting into your discipline program. These are the kids who would get in trouble in 4th and 5th grade. Mom and daddy wouldn't come down to school to check on them, see what's going on. These are the kids who got to know the assistant principal over discipline real good, okay? That's number one. We knew that already. We know that the kids who go to jail, the guys who go to jail, typically didn't do well in the academic setting. But here's the second thing they told me, blew me away. They said approximately 85% of their boys have a mama, daddy, or both who had a significant drug or alcohol problem. Now, that says to me, if you are going to start dealing with kids who are in trouble, and if mom and daddy are in trouble in many cases as well, then when you develop a program, and develop a program for what your needs are, develop a program for what your needs are, and then put that to use. If you have an issue here of kids here because their parents, I mean, I got to be honest, folks. You know, I go and do these sessions all over the country, and we often come up with a whole lot of wonderful, 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 cute, middle-class, suburban solutions for everything. And a lot of the stuff I've seen out there, if I look at the neighborhood I grew up in on the south side of Chicago, won't work. Wouldn't work in my neighborhood, wouldn't play in my neighborhood. I look at where my daddy's from, a little tiny town called Shabuta, Mississippi, won't work. So you got to design a program that's for that community. Now, there's some basic tenets that go in every, and you go anywhere, the basic tenets. But you got to look at what it is you really need and go hire somebody to design a program that is for you. Or give someone on your staff enough time for them to go do the research, to look and see what's out there already, and then design a program that is for you and for what your needs are. And your program may not be transferable to Miami, Florida. Your program may not be transferable to Tupelo, Mississippi. It's okay. Design it for what you need. And I think that's just that. That's the most honest answer I can give you.
Another question? Yes, sir.
One question I had in getting the parents more involved. I have a daughter who's a first grade teacher, and she recently had a little girl in her room that kept falling asleep every day and wouldn't really wake up till about 2 o'clock. And during her home visitation, when she got to the house that just reeked with marijuana, they was having parties in the house every night. The girl was strung out. The point being is, every day in every grade school, there's a little girl or a little boy comes to school. They do not have their hair combed. Their shirt's inside out. The dress is inside out. They haven't ate breakfast. Did mommy get you up? No. Who is looking after these kids? Parents aren't looking after these kids. This goes back to, and to me, you can run all the drug programs that there is in the world, but if this kid's living in a house that every day he's subject to drugs, tell me what else he knows, and tell me how he's going to break it. We've got to come up to train the parents. It's high time to me when this kid comes to school one solid week, his hair is not combed. Somebody needs to be going to that house. Somebody needs to be helping that kid.
Okay.
The question becomes then.
Let me finish it. The little girl, unless my daughter had went to the house and she reported this, they went and investigated. They took the daughter away. But if this had never happened, this girl would have fell right through the cracks. She would have been a drug addict, a prostitute, whatever. That's how she would have ended up living.
Can I tell you one of our problems there? Is that a lot of schools, what your daughter did, very honestly, I'm not trying to knock schools, But there are a lot of schools who really, that don't really, administrations don't really want teachers to get involved in what mom and daddy are doing at home. Because in many cases, mom and daddy then go get a lawyer, okay? And I mean, that's why DARE's in trouble now. One of the biggest criticisms of DARE is that people are saying that DARE is making kids into narcs on their parents. Because the fifth grader doesn't know. Fifth grader comes to school and will tell me or tell Mike or tell Ben, well, my mama's got some of that. My daddy's got some of that. And we've had some cops who I think made maybe some bad decisions who then, how they handled it was maybe bad. But I agree with you 100%. We got to get to the parents, get into the homes. But the focus is not to take the kid out of the home. The focus is to get the household some help. Because the reality is once a couple of kids get taken out of the household, a lot of these kids, they don't want mom and daddy to get in trouble. They don't want to be taken away from mom and dad. They want mom and daddy to stop. Okay? And I think that we haven't figured out yet what to do when there's a parent who's in trouble. And so I had a little girl today. She came and said, Mama's on crack cocaine. The last school I was at today, I don't know which one that was. Jill, what was the last school I was at today?
After Wilson, where'd you go?
Who? Middletown. Okay, I was at Middletown. Had a little girl came up to me. Her friend brought her to me. She hasn't lived at the house with her mama now in about 6 months. She's staying with another girl at the school because her mama's strung out on crack cocaine. Her daddy's down in Florida. Mom and daddy are divorced. She's staying with another kid. Mama's getting child support from the daddy. All right? Mama's got a little piece of job. And, no, not on welfare. Getting a little piece of job. Got a little piece of job. Peace. And getting child support from the daddy. But the problem here is that the little girl, all she kept saying to me is, I don't want to be taken away from my mama. I don't want to be taken away from my mama. Now, she's really not living with her mama. But she goes to visit her mama every day. Because she's worried about her mama and how her mama's doing. Well, my point is, a lot of times schools, what they know to do in a situation like that is it's called Department of Family and Children Services. And what they know to do is take the kid out of the home. And if the kid doesn't have other immediate family around, that kid sees that as, that's not an acceptable solution. That's not what they want. They want mom and daddy to get help. And we haven't figured out in this country yet how to do that. Particularly if that mama can't afford, doesn't have insurance, or can't afford to go to treatment. We got a problem. I agree with you.
But isn't that the whole point, though? Isn't that the program that we should not be working on to come up to how to address this?
But I agree. But I'm go back to what I said first thing. We will never start looking at how to address that until this country wants to address that our biggest drug problem ain't kids, it's adults. And yet, do you notice when everybody running for president last year was mouthing off about stop the drugs, you name for me one national politician who had the guts to speak up about adults using. They didn't talk about it. They kept talking about kids. And until we can get that change, we won't solve that problem. We'll talk around it, we'll dance around it.
And I think
Won't solve it.
another issue that relates to that is parenting. We don't have parenting in high school. You get courses on a lot of things that you might do or be involved with. The most important thing, you probably will get married, probably will have children. You have no idea what you're doing. Ben?
I want to ask a question. I want you to answer me honestly. And the reason I want to ask this question is because I want to see if I'm the only one that feels guilty about this. I have 3 teenagers. Cheerleading, sports, the whole 9 yards. Sometimes I don't want the other kids at my house. Is there anyone else in here like that? Is there anyone in here from Hamilton or from Butler County Children's Services? Is there anyone in here? Oh, good answer. You? Oh, no, wait a minute. There was 3 pointing back at me. I guarantee you if they were here, they would tell you that they are maxed out. Is there anyone in here from Butler County, any of the incarceration facilities? How are we doing over there as far as capacity? Full boat. What are we doing with these people? Where are these kids going to? I picked up a 12-year-old one day that was selling crack on the street, and it was 10:30 in the morning when he should have been in school. I took him to his house. Mom came out of the back room with a man. There was a little puppy tied to to the couch and had defecated and urinated all over the place, and they were heating the house with a charcoal grill. And I'm looking at this little kid and I'm thinking, what are we going to do with you? Some of us are going to have to do what, frankly, I'm uncomfortable with, but we're going to have to accept some responsibility and say, maybe my house. Maybe my house has to become a refuge for a minute. And we have to, these kids are scared to death. And these guys will tell you, these kids rip our hearts out. Sometimes it's all we can do to get up and leave these schools, and kids are hanging on to us, crying, and now it seems like it's just an ocean of faces that all blend together that are just wanting very simple answers to complex problems, wanting somebody to hold me, to love me. The reason we've got such a problem with teenage pregnancy, our girls are just saying, hold me, love me for just a minute. I want someone to love me. Dads, let me tell you something. If you are not a hugger, lover of your daughters, you better become one. And I mean, go in and put your arms, and your sons too, put your arms around them and hold them close to you and say, I love you. Speak the words as hard as it is to speak. Speak it. Because if you do not sing your child's heart song, someone else will. And it'll be the first guy that comes along and just whispers some fancy tune. And they'll be right along with them. Some of us are going to have to expand our responsibilities. And again, gosh, I don't want to preach to the choir. I mean, you are obviously the people that are on the cutting edge and are making a difference. But we're going to have to expand it a little bit. And we're going to have to say, what's working? Let's expand it. Let's pump some dollars into it. Let's do whatever we've got to do. But we've got to give refuge to these kids so they do have a place to go. Because there are crack moms out there. There are alcoholic dads. And they think they did their share of parenting. They birthed them. And that's all they need to do. So we're going to have to accept the burden and the responsibility. Unfortunately for me, it's a wake-up call for me as well. And I appreciate everybody applauding, but it's getting obnoxious. Stop. So let's, if questions more, get back up here. You're doing a good job.
Hold on, Ben. I got to comment on something Ben said because I disagree with him.
That's all right.
Okay? We can agree to disagree, brother.
That's right.
You know, I agree with him on the point that, yeah, we got to start opening up our homes to other kids. You know, my wife and I, we taken 3 boys in. All 3 of the boys were drug dealers when I met them. And my boys, one just graduated from college a year and a half ago. Another's a junior in college with a 3.4 average. The other didn't go to college. College ain't for everybody, okay? But he's working. He has an honest living. He's married, has a child. He's doing well. Proud of my boys. I believe in that. I believe everybody ought to do it. Those of us who are Christian, it's in the Bible. You ought to do it. Now, but on this part about preaching to the choir, I used to go around and say that, Ben, but you know, we're not preaching to the choir. We're preaching to the folks who need to hear this. Because one of the problems that we have is this complacency about casual drug usage. And one of the things I know, you know how we solved the cigarette problem in America? And we aren't completely finished with it, but we come a long way on cigarettes. Folks, when 1964, when the Surgeon General's first warning came out about cigarettes, where they said basically, ma'am, if you smoke cigarettes, you can get lung cancer, emphysema, increase your risk of heart attack, you can die. You want to know something? Very few people stopped smoking in America. You know what most people did? Most folk rationalized that it would never happen to them, okay? They thought about an uncle or an aunt or a cousin or a grandma or a granddaddy they had who smoked for years and said, see, it won't happen to me. You know when we saw a big decrease in smoking? When the Surgeon General's second warning came out. It basically says, sir, if you keep sitting next to that woman and she's smoking, you can get lung cancer, you can get emphysema, increase your risk of heart attack, and you can die. And you know an amazing thing happened in America? Folks who did not smoke got mad. Folks who did not smoke got mad and started saying, hey, you can't smoke that cigarette around me. You got to put that out. And if you're going to smoke outside my house, you better not leave them cigarette butts around my house either. All right? Think about it, folks. How many of you in this room can recall, how many of you in this room hate the smell of smoke? How many of you know somebody who's never smoked, hates the smell of smoke, but before the Surgeon General's second warning came out, you know what people in America used to do? We used to all keep an ashtray at our house, if certain family members or friends came over and we give them a spot for them to go and smoke. How many of y'all remember those days? And how many of you noticed that the minute the Surgeon General's second warning came out that said that secondhand smoke can harm you or your children, almost everybody threw those ashtrays away and said, you can't smoke in my house. You can't smoke in my car. How many of you noticed that? Now, don't you know those folks didn't want people smoking in their house from the beginning? But they didn't feel like they had the right to say something about it. And I'm convinced part of our problem now is that we haven't convinced folks who don't use, like you, that we have a right to not tolerate usage. Now, what do I mean by that? Ben, what I'm talking about is I'm willing to bet you something. Folks here may not be honest with me, but just based on government stats, you know what I know? 30% of all families in America have a substance abuse problem in it. Now, you know what that means? That means to me, minimum 30% of you has an adult, either in your family, maybe not your immediate family, but in your family, or a friend who is probably a casual user of either marijuana or cocaine. How many of you know somebody's either casual user of marijuana or cocaine? Okay? Keep your hands up a minute. Keep your hands up a minute. Everybody's look around. No, don't look at yourself. Look around. Look around. Look how many adults in here say, yeah, we do. I see black adults, white adults, male adults, female adults, old adults, young adults. Now, you know what I also know? The majority of you in this room have never confronted that person if they're a casual user. You know what we wait? We wait until they become a junkie and they're about to lose a house, or they hit their wife, or the family's falling apart, or the house is in such a state now where they're so strung out that it's like what your daughter saw when she went in the boy's house. Then everybody wants to jump in and say, boy, we got to do something. Folks, you waited a little late. Maybe what we got to do is get people to start being willing to speak up when people are at that casual stage. So no, we ain't preaching to the choir. Because I saw many of you raise your hand and said you have people in your family or friends who are casual users. That says we got to get you motivated to understand you have some responsibility with those people. Because guess what? Most of those people you all raise your hands for and that I raise my hand for, most of them, if you want to talk about kids, guess what? Most of them have children. Now, speaking strictly from an African-American perspective, black women have been in the workforce forever, okay? In many cases, the woman could get a job before the man could. So black women have been in the workforce. So to me, that's no excuse if you're single or if you're married. But I think where the difference came in, I look back in my neighborhood where I grew up, there were a lot of single mothers in my neighborhood. But I got to tell you, some of those single mamas did a doggone good job of raising their children, okay? And I think one of the important things is, and I look now in the neighborhood I live in now, I don't think there are any single parents on my block. On my block, everybody, there's a husband and wife. May not be biological mom and daddy, but they're stepmom or stepdaddy, something like that. Every house on my block. And you know what I can tell you? Even though there are two parents there, some of those houses on my block, nobody's done any parenting in the last 15 years. It's not about how many folks are there, it's about the quality of the parenting that goes on. Now, I think one of the things, and when you talk about the mamas working the two jobs and all that, one of the things I think that helped the single mamas in my neighborhood, in Chicago at least, was that they really never had to raise their children alone. Because you did have, in my neighborhood, was Miss Susan May. And Miss Susan May was an older woman. She didn't work anymore. And Miss Susan May, nobody was paying her, but Miss Susan May looked out for everybody's children. And if Miss Susan May went upside your head was just went upside. And you better not tell your mama, because then your mama going to go upside your head because Miss Susan May had to. Not because what you did, but because Miss Susan May had to. Okay? So I think what we got, part of the problem we have now, is that we live in communities that are so fractionalized. People don't really know their neighbors. And I think it's not because we're bad people now and we don't care. I don't think it's that. I think technology has come into play and has made it very difficult for us to know people nowadays. You know, we don't, everybody got central air conditioning now. Everybody got central air conditioning just about. All right? If you live in a trailer park, you got air conditioning. You live in the projects, usually got air conditioning. We got central air. Well, guess what? Where I grew up, folk didn't have central air. So guess what happened in Chicago when it got hot? Everybody went out on the porch. And if it was hot enough for us to come out, guess what all the neighbors did? They were out there too. So you know what? My mom and daddy be sitting out. If you sitting out on the porch, and I'm pointing at you because it was only black folk in my neighborhood, okay? My mom and, well, it was. And listen, that was my home. I don't care what you think about it. It wasn't a hood. It wasn't a ghetto. It was home. And you know what? If you were on the porch, my mom was on the porch, my mom was going to wave at you. Hey, how you doing? Electric dryers. We didn't have dryers then. So you know what the mamas did? You went and hung them clothes out on the line. All right? And if you live in an apartment building, you might have a place down the basement strung out, folk would hang up. So what would happen? You got to know each other. It may have started over gossip or over laundry, but you got to know each other. It's much easier for me to say to somebody I know, girl, can you watch this boy for me? I got to run somewhere. You see, it's much easier for me to ask her that if I know her. Now, notice how I said it. Some of you may say, well, he didn't use proper English. In my neighborhood, that's how I'd say it. If I'm like, girl, can you watch this boy? I got to go somewhere, all right? I got to go down to see her. You watch that boy for me? Now, if we know each other, much more likelihood she'll say yes. If she doesn't know me, guess what? She ain't going to do it. So part of what we got to do, you see, that used to happen naturally, where folk would get to know each other because of technology, and the biggest thing, TV, and all these channels, and the kids don't play outside anymore. Because you know how parents got to know each other then? Whoever's house was the Kool-Aid house. Y'all laughing. In my neighborhood, folk would go to whose house, whoever had Kool-Aid. That's where all the kids would go to get something to drink when they got hot. Or you go out and get somebody's water faucet outside, the sprinkler thing, and you drink the water. Well, your mama got to know me, my mama got to know you that way. Now, what do? All of our children, it seems like when kids play today, particularly in the suburbs, more so than the inner city. In the suburbs, kids don't play by themselves. You know what happens? Some mama comes in a minivan, picks up a load of them, takes them down to the ball field. Somebody's teaching them soccer. Adults handle all the problems. Adults handle all the conflict. Where when I was growing up, we had to be a little more creative. And you know what we did? We disciplined each other. How many of y'all live in a neighborhood where there was a kid who he always had the ball in the back? And one day he wasn't going to let y'all play. And eventually, you know what the community had to do? We had to teach him that he couldn't hold us hostage. And he could bring his stuff. We weren't going to play with him anyway. Guess what you're teaching children? Is that not conflict resolution? But guess what we do now? Now adults solve all the conflict. Coaches, mamas, daddies, we solve all the conflicts. We do all the creative stuff. We choose the teams for them. Whole 9 yards. And then when they get to junior high school, Eric, we turn them loose. And they haven't had training in terms of learning how to solve problems, how to create games. And so guess what's the number one thing kids say today? I'm bored. I'm bored. I grew up poor, and I can't remember not one day being bored because we came up with stuff to do. We didn't have parks around. We didn't have organized stuff, but we were never bored. We played Foursquare. I don't know who invented that game. Naismith invented basketball. Who invented Foursquare? How many of you know what Foursquare is? You know, a lot of kids today, they never heard of it. They don't know what it is. We played hit the top. You put a top when the soda bottles had the little sharp ridge. You played that. You put it on the line, on the sidewalk. You hit it, flips, 5 points. Hit it, doesn't flip, 1 point. We created stuff. Now everything we create for them. So then when they get to be 15, 16, and we cut them loose, because now mama tired of chauffeuring, and they got a license, guess what? They don't have the creativity to think of things to do that are safe. But you know what they see on TV? On the TV movies, whenever kids do something, it's a party. What do you expect? What do you expect? So I think yes, but we got to go back to doing stuff so that people have an opportunity to get to know each other.
We're running out of time, so one more.
Yeah, how do you reach somebody, okay, you know they're doing drugs and everything, how would you reach them when they don't want to be reached? How can you reach them and make them see that what they're doing is they're hurting themselves and the ones that love them? How do you reach
Question,
them?
how do we reach them?
What do you want to hit? Hit it, Mike. Mike got that. Let's go, Dr. Mike. Yeah.
How do you reach somebody that doesn't want to be reached? I think you take a combination of everything that everybody said tonight. Number one, I think there's a certain number of people that, quite frankly, need to be intervened upon, okay? And don't tell me for a minute that anybody who's got a drug alcohol problem comes up to you and says, you know, that's a great idea. I do need to get help. Because no way. They usually get dragged in, kicked, screaming, hollering, whatever, okay? There's a smaller percentage that will say, hey, I've had it, okay? More or less like the book title, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, okay? But there's another percentage that literally do need to be dragged to the water, okay? And there's a percentage of people, that's why I always use good choices, poor choices. There's a lot of parents in the world that, quite frankly, we do need to intervene upon, and we need to take control over their choices because they're hurting their kids and because they're out of control. That's what we do, and particularly drugs, alcohol. But there's a boatload of parents, too, that are just good parents who are not, or excuse me, they're parents using their best choices at the time. I'm convinced, as I talked about many a times, is you get more instructions with a new microwave than you do a kid. They're not taught. You need a license to fish, hunt, and drive. But I tell you what, you don't need a license. I mean, steps 1 through 8 are on a public restroom wall. You can skip 4 steps, still become a parent. But it doesn't tell you how you deal with this kind of stuff. That's why I'm kind of like Jake and Elwood on the Blues Brothers. I'm on a mission from God. And I'm driving around and I'm flying around and I'm telling people, I'm teaching skills. And I'm convinced that people, everybody, all the parents I run into, they want their kid. Nobody comes out and says, you know what, I want a kid so I can just whack them. I want a kid so I can become a drug addict. They don't have the skills to deal with it. It starts with frustration. They're frustrated as could be. They try all the things that their parents tried, and on a new planet it doesn't work. And they tried this stuff, and they resort to hitting, punching, kicking, and then they resort to also their own drinking and drugging. And if they get into drinking or drugging, that's got to be taken care of. We're like, if we go out there and do what we do, which is a lot of prevention stuff, it's like throwing spitballs at a battleship with somebody who's got a drinking drug problem. You deal with that problem first, then you can teach the skills that I'm talking about. With other people that don't have that, you teach the skills. It's kind of like, excuse my French, but it's like being with an alcoholic and like saying, hey, there's no problem, I don't have any problem. Well, it's like urinating in somebody's beer and say, go ahead and you drink it now. You tell me how it tastes. Everybody in here knows exactly. You'd be going, well, gee, it's kind of hard to deny it then, you know. Because I'll tell you what, that's what it all is. And that's all we do on a regular basis is try to help people think differently. Okay? Everybody take both hands, put them up like this. No, Milton, go around and get their wallets. No. Take both hands, put them right on your head. I think one of the things you got to understand tonight is this. Inside your head is your brain. I mean, it's no newsflash, but guess what? It's your best friend and your worst enemy. It's your best friend if people teach you the skills that you've all been talking about and asking about tonight. It's your worst enemy if you close down and you're not open to new alternatives. As a speaker, I learned things tonight, and hopefully as an audience member, you learned something tonight too. And hopefully you go out of here, gang, and you say, you know what? All we can do is influence every humanoid we come in contact with. And there's 2 ways you influence. You teach or you model. What's the most difficult one? Modeling. Because guess what? It comes back to tobacco, alcohol, and drugs insert problem here. What part of the problem do I own? Heard a lot of that tonight. What part of the responsibility do I own? What part of the decisions do I own? Do I allow my kids? Do I allow, if I'm a coach? See, we have the power, control, and choices too. And that was hit a lot here tonight, okay? Make sense?
Well, I don't think we're just teaching to the choir. I certainly learned a lot tonight from listening to these 3 speakers. I'd like to say, first of all, this is going to be on TV Hamilton, and certainly people in Hamilton, Butler County, and Fairfield will have an opportunity to listen to this, and hopefully they won't surf on by the people that need to hear this story. Secondly, I'd like to thank Tom Kelichai from the Alcoholism Council and Rick Jones from Hamilton Parents Partners for getting these speakers together in this program this week. I think it's great, and those 2 gentlemen deserve a lot of our thanks. Secondly, let's give a big round of applause to the 3 great guys that you heard tonight. Milt, Ben, and Dr. Mike gave us a lot to think about. Go home and tape this when it's on the air. You'll need to see it again. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the Elks. See you next year.
Very good. I enjoyed it. Hey, thanks. Enjoyed it very much.
Bob, thank you for wearing your shirt. Good job.
Well done.
Brother, I wasn't disagreeing. I agree 100%.
It's more difficult once they get to the older age because they're going to tell you that they can find it. You know what I'm saying?
Did both of our kids.
She's in trouble.
He what?
Anybody can see that, I don't understand.